my channel. I'm really excited to make this video for you because this is my Disney World vlog. But the first thing I wanted to do was sit down and give you some information about going to Disney World, one with the toddler and two going in 2020 during a pandemic. I know that it's a real controversial topic right now, but some of the background behind why we went this year was that we actually planned this trip out over between 9 and 10 months ago, and we debated back and forth whether or not to continue to go. We didn't know when Disney World was going to reopen. It did reopen in July. At that point, we decided that we would just make it a last minute decision and see how everything went before we went. As you know, we ended up going. One of the things that we did was cancel our flight and decide to drive. It's not that my husband or I were scared to fly. We were just nervous about the girls touching everything in an airport and touching everything on the airplane. So we just made the decision to drive. If you haven't seen it already, I'll link it up here. Go ahead and check out my video on road tripping with a toddler. We drove to Destin and stayed in Destin first before we made the rest of the trip over to Disney World. And we are from Texas area, so it was quite a trip. So our trip actually changed quite a bit throughout the year that I had planned it. They made so many changes at Disney World. We originally were supposed to stay at the Polynesian Hotel, which I was really excited about because this would have been our first time staying there. But once they announced the closure, originally it was going to reopen on August 12th. So we thought that we were good to go because our trip was booked for September 5th. And then about 3 weeks before we were actually leaving for our trip is when they extended it out to October. So they bumped us out of Polynesian and booked us in Contemporary. Now they've actually extended that closure on until next summer due to renovations, which they're remodeling it to the Moana theme, which I'm also really excited about, but really bummed that we didn't get to actually stay there. It was a really nice hotel. It's a 5-star hotel on the monorail, and it's very modern. The one thing that I will say about it is that it's not super themed, and if you know, when you go to Disney World, they have hotels that are a little less themed, a little less Disney all in your face, and more subtle. So I felt like that hotel was real modern and subtle. I mean, there was Disney stuff around, but it wasn't all in your face. And I like Disney all in your face because I'm obsessed with Disney. So that was one thing that I didn't like about it. Another thing was that a lot of stuff is closed down, and we actually knew that before going. So that was just something that we had to weigh our pros and cons, whether or not it was still worth going. So some of the extra activities that are specific to that hotel, for example, is you can see Cinderella's castle, you can see the fireworks show directly from your hotel or from the pool area. It's also right on the dock where you can take the boats. There's also different types of excursions or beach excursions that are available when it's normal, but all of that was closed. Even the monorail train to Epcot was closed. So we stayed on a monorail resort hotel, but we only got to use the monorail to go to one park, which was Magic Kingdom. I had requested to get a different hotel, but because it was 3 weeks out before our trip, all the other hotels were already booked up. So I did like the hotel. I just wanted something more themed and more Disney-ish, I guess you could say. Another good thing about this trip is that we tried out different hotels. So you can take the buses or you can hop on a monorail and go to a different hotel for a dining reservation. Now, they don't let you into a different hotel at this time unless you have a dining reservation. So we headed over to Animal Kingdom Lodge one day for lunch and ate at the Sauna restaurant, which was amazing African themed food. And the cool thing about the Animal Kingdom Lodge is that they have a place where it's almost like a zoo outside. So while you're eating and while you're dining, you can actually look at the animals right outside the window. We did make it over to the Polynesian for dinner one night at the Kona Cafe, which was the only restaurant that was open at Polynesian at this time. They did open up the Polynesian bungalows. So some of the resort is still open for DVC members, which is the Disney Vacation Club members, but the whole resort area is what is closed. So that was something really cool that we got to try out this trip, was going and trying out some different hotels and restaurants at different hotels. Now, traveling with a toddler is a challenge in itself. This is our third trip within the last 3 years, and because we're not close enough to where we can just drive there anytime we want, it's really debatable on when you should take your child to Disney World. One of the biggest things that I got questioned when I took Sailor, who at the time was 10 months old, on her very first Disney trip and Disney cruise, was, why are you taking her? She's not gonna remember anything. Why don't you wait till later? And those are all really good statements. And one thing I can say is that I don't regret that trip at all. I don't regret any of my trips at all. They are a little more challenging, but we have some of the best memories and some of the best times going when she's just 10 months old or 17 months old when we took her the second time around. We really enjoyed ourselves. That's where I found the love for Disney, is on our very first trip, and it's something that we're going to do once a year. This was our yearly trip. We had to check it out. We had to experience what it was like. We knew that it was going to be not as magical, but that was just something we wanted to try and experience on our own. I recommend, if you do want to go with a baby, or if you're debating on going with a baby or a young toddler, is think about if this is going to be your once in a lifetime trip, because if it is, I would wait till they're older. But if you think it's something that you're going to do maybe every other year or more often than once in a lifetime, then I would definitely say go for it, because that is something that we did and I don't regret at all. Another perk to taking them really young is that they're free. So they're free under 3. And as you know, the parks can get very expensive, up to even $100 a day per person. So that's just another perk of going and taking them when they're young or under 3. It is challenging at the same time. We went through several meltdowns. Depending on the time of year you go, it is very hot. There are a few things that I brought on this trip to actually make it more manageable and deal with the heat. So one thing I recommend bringing with you, if you plan to go during the summer, are these cooling towels. So you just get them wet and they can go around your neck, or we used them. The girls would hold on to them in the stroller and it would just help cool them off and also help block them from the sun. I got these at Costco, where they come in a pack of 2, and they also sell them there as well. Another thing we brought were these fans. I got these fans from Amazon, and they actually go around your neck so that you don't have to hold them and they just blow upward. I also would have the girls hold on to them in the stroller in case they also got real hot. Another thing is raincoats. So it will rain every single day, and it did rain every single day on our trip. It was actually kind of nice because it cooled off a little bit. So having raincoats available, I got this one on Amazon for Sailor, and then there was one I wanted at the park, so I actually bought the raincoat for myself at the park and then bought a poncho for my husband when we were there. Another thing that I want to talk about is face masks. We have so many cute little face masks that we bought on Etsy. I have just come to find that the most breathable face masks are actually these medical grade face masks that I purchased at Target. They're not cute by any means, but they are just super, super lightweight, disposable. And when you're outside sweating all the time, you don't want something super thick with a lot of material on your face, because you're constantly just trying to pull it off. And you'll notice that even in my next video, when you watch my Disney vlog, I'm constantly pulling the face mask off of my mouth so I can feel like I'm breathing. So for Sailor, because there are not many places, or at least that I know, that require 2-year-olds to wear masks while outside. It was hard finding her the right mask. I went to Etsy and bought some really small toddler masks. The disposable masks, I haven't bought child size. I think that size is probably for school-aged kids or a little bit older, although I'm not quite sure. So if you know for a fact if the disposable face masks for kids will work on a 2-year-old, then leave me a comment below and let me know. But for the meantime, I purchased some on Etsy that say that they're specifically for age 2 to 5, and I brought 2 of them with us. One thing that I also had to buy at the parks was an extra face mask. Again, it's constantly raining, it's hot. I mean, you're sweating in the mask, so she would constantly pull hers down or take it off, and it'd be wet and it'd be a little sweaty. So make sure that you pack additional face masks. And if you can, get the most loose, breathable face masks you can for your toddler, then I would recommend that. Another thing that I bought on Amazon was actually this clip that you can clip onto the face mask. Sailor, who is our 2-year-old, almost 3-year-old, who was required to wear face masks, you can clip it on and actually it becomes a necklace. So when instead of her just like taking it off and throwing it on the floor, she would take it off and it would just fall like a necklace. So this way it stays around her neck, so that if they asked us to put it back up, then I could just easily put it back up, and then whenever we took a rest, she could just pull it down without having to worry about if she lost it or threw it out of the stroller or whatever. I do recommend buying ones that hook all the way through. This one doesn't quite hook all the way around, so I ended up having to tie the strings. So if you just have a string or anything, you can tie it around and make a little necklace out of the face mask. That way you don't have to worry about them losing it. On my Instagram, I put a note for questions that you may have had traveling during the pandemic, and I'm just gonna answer some of those questions and kind of get my viewpoint on them. So one of the questions was, were the lines long? We went during Labor Day weekend, and surprisingly, I was expecting them to be super short, like people had been saying, but a lot of them were long. For example, Mickey and Minnie's Railroad Train, which is a brand new ride that opened up, I believe, in March, right before they closed the parks down. To get onto that at Hollywood Studios was about an 1.5 hour wait. So some of the rides were pretty long. I would say the average wait time was about 30 minutes, which can still seem long with a toddler. Some of them we could hop right on, but then some of them had 30-minute to an hour wait time, and then as long as an 1.5 hours. And they're currently not doing fast passes, so that can kind of be a damper as well. Next question I had was, how did the girls do touching everything or not touching everything? Did you feel safe? So I will say that I did feel safe. Even though there were a lot of people there, we were outside the majority of the time, and they are very strict with face masks. And I actually noticed this some parks more so than others. Like at Animal Kingdom, when the girls were both in the stroller, Sailor is 2, so anyone 2 and above is required to wear a face mask. She was in the stroller with the top down, and the face mask went below her nose. Then they would stop me and say, "Excuse me, ma'am, can you please pull her face mask up?" So when I mean strict, like they were pretty strict. I noticed at Magic Kingdom, they were a little bit more okay with her. Not so much the adults. I think that it's just with a 2-year-old, it's really hard to wear a face mask, and we almost debated going because of that reason. But she actually did really well. It was a lot of times to get on the ride, we would just tell her, you know, we can't ride this ride unless you pull your face mask up, and she understood, and she would pull it up while we were in line and while we rode the ride. And then when we would stop, we would give her time to not wear it, and she would run around. So they were okay with that. It was more so in line, or they have people walking around the parks doing face mask checks, and sometimes we would get stopped then if her face mask was down or below her nose. So overall, I felt pretty safe. I knew that there would be risks involved, but I mean, just about how strict they were. There were hand washing stations all around the parks, hand sanitizing stations after every ride, constant announcements, people walking around the park asking you to social distance and face masks. that was probably the strictest place I've ever been so far in this pandemic, making sure people were following precaution. So overall, I actually did feel really safe. Another question I got was, would I go back? And was it worth the money? Because there were so many things that they didn't do. If you've been before and you go back now, you have different expectations. You know that they're not doing the parades, they're not doing the fireworks shows, some of the transportation they're not doing, such as some of the boats to some places and the monorail to some. Not having the full experience was kind of sad. It wasn't as magical, if you know what I'm talking about. I knew that going into it, but it was a little bit sad. I debated whether or not to go back over Christmas time and to book another trip for Christmas, but in my opinion, the prices are too high to go back and not have the full experience. So overall, was it worth the money? For this trip with our family, to me personally, yes. And the reason why I say that is because I just love Disney in general. We got to experience all 4 parks. We did Magic Kingdom, Animal Kingdom, Epcot, and then lastly, we did Hollywood Studios. One of the things that I absolutely love about Disney is that it's one place you can go where you feel, with your kids, where you feel like you're accepted, or just that if your kid is having a meltdown in the middle of the park, people just kind of look at you like, we've been in your shoes. Whereas if you were to go to a luxury beach vacation trying to bring your kids along, people are probably like, can you please take your kid outside and quiet them down? So here is where I just feel like people, they know, they're accepting. This is a place you go for kids, and it's just something magical about it. One of the days, Sailor, my almost 3-year-old, was having a meltdown at Animal Kingdom, and we were right by a concession stand. And the lady at the concession stand was like, ma'am. And I turned around and she was holding an ice cream, and she's like, here, give this to her. And I was like, I didn't buy it. And she's like, no, this is for your daughter. She's upset. So my daughter just instantly, her eyes went wide open, and it was just such a kind gesture that they just understand. I feel like anywhere else that I could go with kids, they would just be more annoyed opposed to trying to give her a free ice cream to help her. Another day, we were eating breakfast at a restaurant, and Savannah, my 14-month-old, was just ready to get out of her high chair, and somebody walked over and, you know, said hi to her and tried to get her to kind of stop crying, and it didn't work, so she left. But then she came back with this little Tinkerbell light and gave it to her and was like, here, I hope you feel better. And it was just so like everything they do there is just so nice. The cast members are wonderful, and that's what just keeps us coming back. The small details at all different ages. Another thing that we took advantage of this trip that we hadn't before was rider swap. So if you're not familiar with rider swap, you know that on a lot of the rides, you have to be a certain height to be able to ride. It's where you get to take turns, where if your kids can't ride, are not tall enough to ride the ride, then you can take turns as an adult. But I had the misconception that you'd have to go and wait in line, and then once you got at the very end of the line, then one person would jump off, and then once that person jumped off, you hand them the kids on the other side, and then you jump in. But that's not the case. I'm a little late to the game on this, so hopefully you don't make the same mistake. What happened is Chris went and got in line, and I went up there and got my Magic Band scanned for Fast Pass access. So even though they're not doing Fast Pass now, you still get Fast Pass access to do rider swap. So he waited on a few of the rides. I think there was some that were up to 45-minute wait, while I strolled around with the kids. They took a nap, did whatever we needed to do, eat a snack, and then once he got off the ride, he just called me, and then I went to the line and scanned my Magic Band and got Fast Pass all the way up to the front. So that way I didn't have to wait in line at all. He basically waited in line by himself, and then once he was done, I got to jump on the ride basically up to the front. So that was one of the questions I had, is they're not doing Fast Passes. How does rider swap work? Well, they're still doing Fast Passes for rider swap. You just can't sign up to get a Fast Pass and have your whole family go on the ride. We waited until the last day to actually do rider swap, which I wish we would have done that the through all the parks. So even though my kids are young, we just had the best time. It's something that you just want to experience and go and you feel comfortable and safe and with all the mechanisms in place, then I do recommend you go and take advantage of the lower crowds. But if you feel like it's going to be your once in a lifetime trip, then I recommend waiting until everything opens back up. We have another trip booked for May, so I'm really hoping that by that time they have opened up a lot more of the extra stuff that make it just a little more magical. That's all I have for this video. Make sure that you stick around and watch my next video, which is actually our Disney World vlog. So it's really exciting. I show you sneak peeks of the rides and just how it is going back in 2020 and how it was going back with our toddlers. They had such an amazing time, so I really hope you check out my next video. Thanks.